What would you see the future of access control and what would have evolved by then?
Recognise you're walking towards the building and we work out if you've got a credential and we'll just open the door for you and you don't have to do anything. And so it's more about much better customer experience than it is about anything on a functional level. It's not about off the intercom or, any security element of it.
Getting through the door, it's about the whole contactless experience. So the administration, the enrolment, you've got much more. COVID has kind of driven unattended receptions and sort of manless kiosks and entry. So how do we get people from their sofas to whether it be a place of work or a gym or whatever it might be?
In both aspects, both in your door intercoms and also access control. Predominantly in both terms, there's always been an on-prem access control unit, controller, fed by the reader, you go and do that. But are both of you seeing, and is this driven from the integrators or is this driven from the manufacturers, that we need to start moving to cloud-based platform? Welcome back to Room Secured, real talk from inside the industry. In this episode, we're diving into access control, one of the most rapidly evolving areas of security. Over the last few years, we've seen huge shifts in how people think about access, from cards and fobs to mobile credentials, cloud platforms, and biometrics. But how much of this is innovation and how much is just hype? To explore this, I'm joined by Jamie from Suprema, known globally for their work in biometrics and touchless technology, and Jez from 2N, one of the leading names in IP-based access and intercom systems. We'll be discussing where access control has come from, how it changed through COVID, the role of cloud, and what the future looks like for installers, manufacturers, and end users alike. Right, let's just dive straight into it. First question I want to open up this podcast with is, how have you seen the evolution over the last decade with access control? Like, for example, with CCTV and intruder, we've seen lots of changes taking place. How do you seen it with the access control sector?
So, good question. I think, interestingly, I've on my journey up here was listening to the previous podcast with Gary and Lewis, talking about CCTV and coax and the crossover to IP. I think, interestingly, access control was kind of, in our industry, almost a bit ahead of its time. I think IP's been around a lot longer in access control, sort of intelligent controllers. And so I think 10 years is, I would say the first 5 years of those last 10 years, not a lot changed. I think the last 5 years, as we kind of...
I think with the introduction of COVID and stuff, I think that throw up a lot of things. I'm sure we'll discuss that as we come down.
Because that had a kind of market effect on the acceleration of the industry. I think what I would say is the landscape of access control particularly, and door entry, that's probably slightly not one for me, but I think the landscape and the competitive nature of access control has changed. So, whether that be at the enterprise level or down in that kind of mid-market, was still, particularly in this region, dominates the largest kind of proportion of the market. So more competitive. I think IP's been around certainly since I've been in the industry.
How many years is that?
I'm probably coming up around 25 years.
Wow.
So, I think we talked off air about Paxton. They were very early adopters of IP intelligent controllers, and I think the market has just kind of followed that trend. Card technology is obviously ever evolving. I think really, and again we'll touch on it over the next hour or so. The introduction of biometrics, which is obviously our sweet spot, and more recently mobile credential. Like I say, I think in the last 5 years we've definitely seen a shift. even in biometrics, to be quite honest with you, that has changed enormously in the last 5 years, and the sort of relative demands. And one thing that's interesting, I would say, is the similarities between the interest in mobile credential technology and the adoption of it and the reservations around it and how it's going to market and being deployed have got real similarities to the way biometrics came into the market. Fingerprint primarily, obviously face is more prevalent these days, but there's a real similar journey in that respect. And I think it's led by external forces. So,
well, that was going to be my next add-on to that, is what do you think has driven the change within the industry? And you were saying external forces.
Yeah,
could you narrow that down a bit?
Yeah, I think, from a biometric standpoint and, just by its very nature of the type of product it is, Apple, however many years ago, 7, 8 years ago, maybe a little longer, maybe 10 years now.
They were the first one who brought out the touch
so
screen.
They bought
biometrics, didn't they?
They bought a company called Touch ID and immediately entered the biometric market space. And we're not even in the same markets, but they almost became a competitor. It certainly made our job of providing demo kit to our sales guys easier, because we could get rid of all of the boot stock and you just take a mobile phone, right? Because, really, what that kind of did, the mobile technology smartphone immediately started making people consider, what was possible with the device. Many a time I've sat in meetings with potential customers, specifically integrators that have always worked on traditional, probably installing coax, CCTV, traditional access control systems, and had bad experiences of installing biometric technology 15, 20 years ago. So are very dismissive, but are sat across the table using their fingerprints to get into their phone. So, it's this kind of dichotomy of, it's terrible, but I use it every day. So there's this whole crossroads of security versus convenience. And over the last 5 to 10 years, certainly the last 5, I think we're really in an age where mobile and biometrics, whether it be fingerprint or face, there's a real shift in terms of A, what's possible, but B, what people are willing to accept.
Yes.
As a market, I think we've got a job. Manufacturers, it's our job to educate, but I think from a market perspective, we've got a lot of established integrators and installers out there that maybe aren't as comfortable with new technology and so aren't as confident in passing that knowledge on to end users.
So is it similar, like with the CCTV game, is educating them to then educate the end users?
Our game, we need to do one or two things. We need to educate the integrator, recognise that we've got new, younger, more kind of interested integrators and engineers coming into the marketplace. Not enough of them, but that's a whole different topic, right? But also, I think what we're recognising is our need to get to the end user.
Yeah.
Because the end user wants it. They don't know they can get it, but they want it.
Yeah.
And it's finding the people that are confident enough to do that.
Well,
right?
I sort of wanted to jump in because it occurred to me during what you were saying, one of the sort of external driving factors, I mean, we've sort of skirted around the whole COVID thing, but something I've just popped into my head, for us, one of those factors is Airbnb, that people want to deliver access to, buildings, apartments, whatever.
Well, I think one thing that has changed a lot, because the rise of Airbnb and serviced apartments has changed a lot how people would predominantly enter a building.
Yeah, and I think also, you're talking about biometrics that probably, to be very broad about it, is probably for people that are more security conscious and, want areas that they have more control over. We'll get into it later, I'm sure, the whole sort of GDPR, ethical, whatever you want to call it, stuff around biometric stuff. But, we're talking about things like QR codes and PIN numbers delivered remotely, short-term access for things like Airbnb, which is at the less secure end of the spectrum, but it's also more ephemeral, it's more temporary, but easy to deliver, requires very little from the user in terms of they don't need special apps or whatever. But it gets into this thing of what's driving that is customer need. People, whether it's Airbnb, you talked about building sites or whatever, but certain sort of use cases drive certain types of access control that meets the need of the site. And I think sometimes the integrators can't put themselves in the shoes of their customers. They want to stay inside their comfort zone of, we know this technology, we've used it for a long time, we know how to deploy it, we know what it does, what it doesn't 100%. Do, and we wish things could stay the same. Unfortunately, whether it's Airbnb coming onto the market or Apple introducing biometrics to the world by putting it on their phones or whatever, the world keeps moving on.
I kind of think the reality from a manufacturer's perspective in security, my take anyway, is that we can't hide from the fact that the likes of Apple and Samsung and Google and all of these guys, look, they are the drivers for technology change, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so whatever lives in our kind of pocket kind of drives what our demands and our needs are.
Yes.
So if I put a mobile app on an app on my phone, if I have to access that app using a PIN number and I can't use Face ID now, I'm more likely to delete the app than I am to start using it, or I'll find one.
It's gone to convenience now, hasn't it?
And this is that crossover, right? And so when you start getting into the privacy conversation, I know we're dancing around a little bit, but that's where there is education around this. And look, legislation and personal data privacy, look, it's not a new thing. We've encountered that from day dot doing biometrics, right? But we're not purely we're a technology company, not a biometric company, right? But and so this is about education. So when we try and sell a biometric reader or mobile credential, is just the same. Or interestingly, we're learning from the market that a few years back we didn't, we actively discouraged the use of QR codes. I've used it multiple times today to get here, right? And so the reality is that QR is a really important part of today's everyday living, and so that's in our pockets. So how do we bring that into the intercom, door entry, access space in a secure, convenient manner that people are willing to adopt?
Yeah.
And I think that's really that's kind of the conversation and the question that we need to be having. And from an end user perspective and integrators, it's not about shoving this stuff down their throats. It's about educating and supporting. And that's one thing that's really important from a manufacturer's point of view. It's not just about delivering hardware and saying, look at this new shiny thing. It's about what solutions are we able to provide to people's problems, and how can we support you as an integrator delivering it to these customers? Because we're getting the customers knocking on the door wanting the solution. So the Airbnb kind of scenario is landlords want that kind of facility. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And it makes sense to the consumer, but how do we get that into their hands? Right?
Well, and it's also, I think, there's a couple of things there. One is it's about we're giving a spectrum of tools to the integration channel. So there isn't one answer to, you want access control, right, cards and fobs. Yeah. That's it. It's, at one end of the spectrum, we've got...
I think if you do that, you're doing the customer a disservice. Going back to your point about people selling, your point about integrators selling what makes it is comfortable for them.
Yeah.
That's doing the end user a disservice.
Well, and this is is it the Gartner technology curve? But whatever it is, introduction of new technologies and adoption of them, there's always this bump as new technologies come in where basically people have to work out what the upside is, because you're having to learn something new, you're having to do things in a different way. So our instinctive thing is, let's stick with what's safe. Why do we need this new thing? And then at some point you start to see other people maybe using the technology and going, oh, but now they can do this, or it saves them this amount of time, or whatever it is. And it's like, oh, it's worth the hassle factor of learning this new thing because it opens up these doors, or it gives us more choices, or whatever it is. And I must admit, in my limited time in the security channel, and I've seen this in things like the home automation channel as well, anyone who's technical and on the install side, you want to stick with what you know, because you know how to estimate how much time it's going to take and all the rest of it, and you can guarantee a result to the customer. The problem is outside forces are changing customer expectations, and if all you can do is go back and say, well, I've got this one offering, it's pretty rock solid, that's not good enough. The customer will go, well, I've seen this other thing. The guy next door's got this touch thing, or he's got facial, or he's got using QR codes to rent out his flat or whatever. I want that. So I think there's an element of the channel has to understand, investing in learning it's a necessity, because the world keeps moving, and if you don't keep up to date with it, your competitors certainly will.
Absolutely.
But also then you become a value add to your customer, because you're the expert in that field, and you have a toolbox that has a number of different options in it that you can offer, and you can pick out the right ones for each customer, rather than, all I've got is a hammer, so every problem looks like a nail approach.
And I know we'll probably get onto it, but I think that's also that being value add to the customer, both from our point of view into the integrator, but from them into their customer, is again not selling a solution that fits that problem, but finding out what else can be done with what's on offer. So solutions, and it's very kind of cliched, but solution selling rather than just box shifting.
Correct.
And that's, do you know what, from my perspective, or certainly my kind of business perspective, that's far more interesting and far more kind of satisfying to be able to deliver a
full integration
a full integration, or whatever it might be, that addresses, we came in to fix that problem, but we've been able to fix this and this. That is like the golden ticket.
Well, and
right?
I think also from a business standpoint, it stops you being an anonymous service that, a lot of security guys seem to get their business through tendering for stuff. And so basically they're an anonymous provider to that customer at that point. They're just one of the hats in the ring. They get picked based on, what they can do and what price they charge for it. But if they open the customer's eyes to, well, you could also do this other stuff, or, I see you've got this other problem, then you start to have a relationship with the customer, and, to be mercenary about it, you don't have to spend the time, effort and money to find another customer for your next job. You know your customers, and they're going to have hopefully repeat business for you, or an expanding range of business. But also you stop competing with other people for that business, so you can charge something in line with what your real needs of the business are. You're offering a value, people understand that, and the rule is people only care about the cost if they don't understand the value. If they think you offer exactly the same as 20 other people, they'll just buy the cheapest one.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one thing I want to expand on is, we've mentioned it before, is COVID. And during the COVID times, especially with both the door intercoms, access control, you always had the push to exit or the fingerprint readers. So there was touch involved. And obviously when COVID came across, no one wanted to touch anything, let alone even shake hands. And you've got here now, let's start off with the residential sector. How do you think, did manufacturers quickly adopt to that change where, whoa, we need to bring something out now where touchless technology needs to come out at the forefront?
I'm probably not the right person to ask because I wasn't in the security industry at that point. I was in the home automation side. So we were tending to deal with, individual, quite wealthy homeowners, and what they were looking for is probably a bit different to, large blocks of flats, offices, data centers, whatever, where you're dealing with a lot more throughput of people. I know, as a manufacturer, I've seen the legacy of it. So we have technology on our intercoms where we can do motion detection, and actually now we can do facial detection but not recognition, so we can recognize that is a human face moving towards the intercom. Let's then reach out and see if there's a Bluetooth credential or something on the back of it, set some other access control function into some process into action. We have methods that were, came about to make it a touchless experience during COVID. In my limited experience, I would say that doesn't get used too much now.
Yeah.
It's not a common request. Where I have seen it, and I can think of one case study in particular, it's there as a convenience, luxury aspect to it. It's, we want to make this a very seamless experience as you arrive at the building. We, recognize you're walking towards the building, and we work out if you've got a credential, and we'll just open the door for you, and you don't have to do anything. And so it's more about giving definitely a much better customer experience than it is about anything on a functional level. It's not about, not catching germs off the intercom or any security element of it, because in some ways it slightly undermines the security aspect. It opens the option for things like tailgating a bit more.
Correct.
But again, this is something I think we sort of touched upon it with the Airbnb and biometrics and stuff. Access control covers a spectrum of needs now. It's not just about security. It's about a balance between security and convenience. And in some doors, let's say, convenience is definitely a bigger chunk of what's needed. In others, say access to a plant room or a comms room or something like that, maybe convenience is way down the list and security. And so we'll implement a method that, frankly, is more hassle for the user, but that's very secure. Deliberate, because we want to be very careful about who can go through that door.
I mean, again, a majority of our business is obviously commercial, but I think from a residential perspective, I think what COVID would have driven more, that, everyone talks about contactless, and we've built a roadmap and a portfolio off the back of what happened in COVID, and I'll touch on that in a second. But I think residential drove. So again, talking contactless, everyone thinks about the door.
Yeah.
When you actually strip it right back, it's not just about getting through the door; it's about the whole contactless experience. So the administration, the enrolment. So you've got much more. COVID has kind of driven unattended receptions and sort of manless kiosks and entry. So how do we get people from their sofas to whether it be a place of work or a gym or whatever it might be, with a credential without ever having to meet them, right? Yes. And so that's driven not just the physical credential change, but I think the software and administration side of that. And so, I think in an ideal world, I wouldn't have a house key. I think it's going to be a while before that changes, but I certainly think the road to that has been accelerated as a result of COVID.
Well, actually, so we've been doing a lot of research into the build to rent sector because it's a growth sector within residential. And one of the things, the messages I keep hearing when I talk to people who operate residential buildings is our biggest cost is staff. I was talking to a company recently and they estimated for a junior member of property management staff, it actually costs the business somewhere between £40,000 and £50,000 a year. And so if they can make, some of that process touchless, the driver is not disease and that side of things. It's hard finance. It's like if we can not have one extra person here, then actually that every year is saving us a big chunk of money. And so things like Bluetooth credentials that can be issued remotely and rescinded remotely and that sort of thing is very much on their minds, because it's like, well, actually, the technology may cost a little bit more up front, but we're saving quite a lot of money every year. So it's not just COVID that sort of drove that mindset. I think the shift to make staffing as efficient and profitable as possible is also then backing that up.
I think just to kind of close off the COVID side of things, and being the manufacturer of product that we are, we've had face technology, face authentication products for the best part of 20 years.
But were they not utilised as much?
So I'll tell you this, like real life, as my son would say. I'd been at Suprema probably about 5 or 6 years before COVID happened. So I had this face authentication device to sell. I reckon in 5 years I probably sold about 20.
Right.
And subsequently, since COVID, Suprema UK alone,
we've the best-selling product,
hands down. So this year alone, we've sold thousands. And actually, if you look at our business and our technology roadmap, it is all driven around face and mobile credential technology. Face, mobile, and cloud are the three kind of technology focuses for a business like ours now. Fingerprint technology is still, our biggest deployed product. We've got years worth of legacy systems that we're managing and upkeeping. But there's if we look at our global sales from 2019 to 2024, there's a clear shift. And that's not. It's still growth, but the product set that we're selling is completely different.
And that wouldn't have happened had we not gone through what we went through with COVID.
What I would say is that we would have anticipated that shift to start happening now, not 5 years ago.
Yeah, so it accelerated it.
Absolutely,
then,
and literally overnight, changed people's kind of interest in what was available. And again, this goes back to that kind of integrator end user relationship, whereby that product's been available for a lot longer than people realised, and actually not as expensive as they realised. But the integrator wasn't comfortable in having the conversation. COVID almost forced them into having that conversation, right? And they have to go and find somebody that can provide it and support it.
Yes. It's sort of the mega trend thing of it's something outside of an industry, our industry, shifts, and frankly, that outstrips the whole marketing spend of the industry up until that point, because it's a worldwide thing that happens, or Apple does something. That's right.
We go back as far. So we got some key kind of points of history that have affected our business. So 9/11, the need for high security.
Yes.
And again, the kind of same thing happened. So a massive influx of biometric manufacturers bringing fingerprint, or companies bringing fingerprint technology out because that's what was available at the time, or hand geometry, flood the market, and after 18 months, 2 years, then like the strongest survive.
Yeah.
Apple go and buy Touch ID, and we start seeing biometrics as a commoditized kind of product, and then that shifts the needle again, and then COVID happens, And all of a sudden, you can go to Costco and buy a face reader, right? Whether it's any good or not is kind of up for debate. But we had kind of 18 months there of everybody doing face authentication, face detection, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yes.
And that, you touched on recognition and authentication and stuff like that. So that's interesting. But after 18 months, 2 years, you're still, there's more competitors in the marketplace for face now than there were for fingerprint left. But in terms of quality, there's still a handful. There's only a handful, really.
Yeah.
But without question, COVID will be a kind of key stake in the ground for access control as a whole, but particularly the credential kind of issuance, I guess.
Just a quick reminder that today's episode is sponsored by Knowio by Innovate. Knowio is more than just an app. It's an ecosystem of IoT technology that simplifies and unifies security system control in the outdoor world.
You touched on cloud, and that's one thing I want to move on to in both aspects, both in your DORA intercoms and also access control. Predominantly, in both terms, there's always been an on-prem system. Access control unit, controller, fed via the reader, you go and do that. But are both of you seeing, and again, is this driven from the integrators, or is this driven from the manufacturers, that we need to start moving to cloud-based platforms? I have seen there are other manufacturers who are slowly implementing cloud, and some of them saying cloud is the future. We need to start moving away from on-prem. What's your guys' takes on this?
I think 2N's approach is we have both, so take your pick as to what the right tool for the job is. Bigger picture, in terms of where the driving factors are coming from, I think partly it's us as a manufacturer deciding. So our cloud platform, over the last 2 years I've been with the company, has evolved from basically being a way to connect mobile phones into our intercom system to answer a call from the front door, to, actually we've got this cloud server and it's, knows about this building
do a lot more
system.
Stuff with it.
Maybe we start doing access control, maybe we start doing other functions. It's now it's an access control interface because it's a way of delivering mobile credentials, but it's also, in the last year, we've added in the ability for selected residents to issue guest credentials out, so QR codes and pins and things like that. And we see that as being a tool that fits the needs of particularly the residential sector. Our on-premise solution is much more geared to the commercial sector because they want lots of logging, they want anti-passback, they want, attendance monitoring and all these sort of things. Nothing to stop using one tool in another environment, but generally speaking, our feeling is on-premise works well for the sort of office-like commercial type environment. It's what they're used to. It's delivered as a virtual machine, so if you want to put it in some sort of online server, you can do, but nominally it's an on-premise solution. I don't know, honestly, whether there's technical reasons why it stays on-prem rather than just goes into the cloud. I'm not techie enough to know that, but it's a little bit of. I wouldn't say it's being driven by customer demand, although we're obviously taking the temperature of what we think those target customers want. It's being driven by our perception of what customer demand is and what the best way to deliver that is. And so, cloud works well, especially if you've got multiple sites. So if you've got, a housing association or some sort of rental organization.
Integrate all the sites together in
Exactly,
one platform.
and do it centrally, and issue credentials centrally if need be, or on a site-by-site basis. So it's being driven by what our understanding of market needs is and what the right tool is. I don't think, I think 2N's DNA is that we're not, having lived in Silicon Valley for a long time, we're not like some Silicon Valley sort of startups where it's like we read a headline somewhere that something's hot, so now everything is about that. It's not like we're doing cloud because, well, cloud's the groovy thing to do. We're doing cloud because, well, we sort of had to for the phone thing, but then it makes sense to expand that out into a more wide-ranging tool, and actually locating it in the cloud makes a lot of sense. Under the skin, each of our devices, whether it's an access unit or an intercom, because they're sort of the same device under the skin, host pretty much all the data locally. So actually, they're just management platforms. They're a way of giving an building operator or whatever one place to go in and put all their users, put in their credentials, put in the areas of the building, and create relationships between those. But actually, that is then pushed out to individual devices. So cloud on-prem, it sort of doesn't make much difference at the end of the day, because it's that thing by the door that's actually got the data that gets you through the door or not. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I first started to try and sell cloud 11, 12 years ago.
And how was it perceived then?
Niche would be the word that I'd use. Niche, and I don't think a lot has changed until quite recently. Specifically,
and again, do you think it's changed
control.
recently now with the tech platforms? Like you're saying, you've got Apple Cloud, Google Drive, OneDrive. Do you think that's shifted?
Yeah, I think that kind of
helps.
Drives it. It definitely helps. And again, the whole kind of people's consumption of kind of technology and we all bank online now. Everything, all of our banking's online, and if you're a member of something, all of that's handled online.
Everything's
right?
online.
And actually, when you kind of look, so Suprema as a business, we're not all in on one kind of direction, right? So I think we would largely suggest, or we believe from the feedback that we get from our customers, that the larger enterprise kind of customer and the type of estates they're managing and the kind of level of security that they're looking for, on-prem is probably here for
a long time coming.
Quite a long time. And also the transitioning from on-prem to cloud, then the cost implications and things like that are things that need to be considered. But again, going back to your point, is the type of data that they want and the way they want to handle that data, even down to mobile credentials. We've got customers that want mobile credentials, but typically the way that you handle it is through the cloud. We're having to design systems that give them the facility to do it, but on premise, so they own their own kind of instance of our issuance platform. If you look further down, and again, we touched on this while we were having a coffee before, I think that, the mid-market and kind of smaller number of doors with multiple estates, like franchise-type businesses and things like that, I think that cloud is makes much more sense to these kind of clients now than maybe it did 11 years ago when I was trying to sell it to people. So I think, again, very similar to 2N, we provide both kind of options, but it's kind of the client determines the direction they want to go to. So we've got customers using our BioStar Air platform that we've not long launched, but they've got over 300 doors on the cloud, and we've got clients that have got 15 doors that will never move to the cloud. They just, it's just not in their DNA to do so. So I think there's much more interest in it now, it's not as niche as it used to be. But and again, the competition is much greater. But I still think as an industry, we're kind of we're still discovering the kind of perfect client for it.
Do you find people ask for a cloud or specifically a non-cloud solution based on it being the right tool for the job, or just because of some prejudice they've got of like, oh, everything's cloud now, yeah, we should have cloud?
I think there's certain businesses are all in, right? And I think that interestingly, again, I keep deferring to biometrics. I'm very conscious to make sure that everyone knows that Suprema isn't just a biometric manufacturer, albeit that's what we're kind of known for. But so there's a lot of cloud, whether it be access control platforms or whether it be time and attendance type solutions, workforce management, whatever you want to call it. That market, if you look at those markets, the time and attendance market, there's so many platforms. They're cloud ready, or they have been.
That's right,
for a long time, right? And so we're working with a lot of those. And again, I think we'll probably talk about and touch on integration. We integrate with a load of T&A companies, and they've got cloud platforms. Biometrics fits time and attendance because it's true identity. And if I'm doing payroll, time theft, present my face or my finger, it has to be me before I can get paid. Now, the companies that have got that are so ready for cloud, but then you put biometrics in, you've got to put a box in a corner so that we can manage the biometric data. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
And that's true of a lot of the cloud applications for access control that are out there now, right? So we are developing, or there is a need, and we have a product called Clue, which allows you to host our devices and the biometric data in the cloud, so AWS. And that makes sense. So if you go into a company that's very ready for the cloud and they adopt, and that's their model, then we can give them that product fits them perfectly, right? But then there's other clients that it's either not the right product for them, and we might convince them to go down the on-prem.
Yeah, I mean,
route.
the reason I brought it up was I definitely sort of, and it's not all the time, but I've definitely seen on a semi-regular basis, specifications or requests for one thing or the other, and you're thinking, that's not actually the best tool for that job, but, you've decided you want to go a particular route for what seem like arbitrary reasons. And I get the feeling that's sort of, again, maybe the channel not quite listening to the customers enough and understanding, okay, this is what we're trying to achieve. And, if we've got something where there are multiple sites, but one sort of centralized management thing, seems to me cloud is a great way to do that, because you're connecting multiple sites to one thing centrally. But if you've got one site, why do you need cloud for that?
What I think, talking about this week is interesting, because I think, for all the kind of those people on the fence with cloud right now, with what's happened earlier this week with AWS.
I wanted to bring up,
I just mentioned AWS and thought, oh, hang on.
I wanted to bring that up.
But that, depending on kind of the impact that it has, that can knock back the appetite to go down that route.
Now if a customer said to you, where's your stuff hosted? And you say, okay, we're on AWS. And then the next question is going to be, okay, what would have been the impact? AWS went down. We couldn't access the site, or we couldn't issue credentials.
Yeah.
What would be your response to that?
Well, with cloud, there's typically redundancy. So obviously it's hosted
locally as well somewhere.
Locally. So there is kind of redundancy in place for these things, particularly with security and access control and things like that. But trying to access Slack or WhatsApp or Fortnite or whatever it is, it's perception, right?
Yes.
So the adoption of cloud takes a bit of a kick in for a couple of months because of what's just happened. You know, that's not to say that a big enterprise estate hasn't gone down. You know, the cybersecurity issues that some of the big corporations have had over the last few months. You know, I've seen firsthand kind of the effect that's had on a couple of them. So, yeah, I don't think it's not going to happen overnight, Cloud, but I do think that the kind of logical progression will be that there is a huge chunk of the access control market that has it will benefit from being in the cloud. If you look at the kind of the breakdown of 30%, I'm just kind of generalising a bit, but still kind of 70% of the access control market is your up to 20 doors, right?
Yes.
So depending on what sector or industry you're in, then cloud, I think, has a really important role to play there, and it kind of provides consistency. I think enterprise, it's very dependent on the type of client that you're working with. So similar to 2N, I think we're not an all or nothing kind of solution, and I think we recognise that there's opportunity to do to quote one of my customers, access for non-access control businesses, and this opens up a whole world of opportunity because membership platforms, time attendance, workforce management, you know, intercom, smart buildings, they're all in the cloud and have been doing it for a while. So how do we, as a manufacturer, how do we utilise our products in those environments where people don't want on-premise? So
when you start moving to cloud, are we now introducing licenses and monthly costs, etc.? Because obviously there's a cost to host everything in the cloud.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's a recurring. I mean, that's kind of the. You know, that's the kind of interest from a manufacturer's point of view, and you know the ability to generate recurring revenue, right? And we were talking about licenses before. Well, it gives you consistency, but again, the customers that are bought into that are also so. You know, again, CRM systems. So the more IT managers and IT departments come into the decision making around security, they're not used to upfront. Right, this is going to cost you £100,000, and then we'll come in every couple of years and do firmware upgrades and things like that. They're used to the Cisco's and the Salesforce and
where there are licenses.
Where there's licenses
every year.
Yeah, and so relatively, I think the kind of costs for licenses that we're talking about for security and access control compared to what you're paying for these kind of CRM type,
minimal.
It is minimal, and these guys they're used to it. They don't understand it if you don't operate like that, right?
But I think there's a couple of points there. You know, as a 2N employee, I have to say, not all companies operate on the recurring license basis. You know, and that's something having come from the larger sort of IT network, IT sort of industry, I found a little bit surprising with 2N is they're definitely from the hardware mindset of like even things like our, you know, on-prem software, you buy it and then you're done.
Yeah, similar to us.
Because it's that sort of mindset. Yeah, generally speaking, other than making calls out to mobile phones, there's no sort of recurring fees or per device fee for access and that sort of thing. But that's a company by company decision.
Yeah,
that's our chosen approach to the market. I think the interesting thing that you touched upon there that is a bigger topic is you talk about IT people and other sort of non-security silos within a company. And one of the things I just wanted to sort of maybe pull into the conversation there is I think this is something our integrators are going to have to learn to work with, because these products don't just live in a security environment and that's it. They are IT devices, and you know, especially with our intercoms where we're making calls across the network and now, you know, calling Microsoft Teams or something like that. There's all sorts of things where the lines are blurring. And I think
you're right. It's not just now a security product. And I think on one of the previous podcasts, Gary from Hikvision, he mentioned you really want to get dialogue with the IT people now.
Yeah.
Because now, before, let's say we were just talking to a security manager, no, we need to get IT in the room because those products sit on the network.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on, as you've been mentioning, biometrics. And for people who don't know, biometrics, you're placing your fingerprint on a reader. Where is that information of your biometrics held?
Where do you want it to be held would be kind of the answer to that.
It's more
right? So
from a data protection side of point.
So the question asked, so the answer is it can be held. So the company that Suprema don't hold it.
Okay.
It's not, we've got no access to it once we provide it to, so we provide this solution to the client, and if they just plug it in and start using biometric only solutions, whether it be fingerprint or face, that template, not image, that template is stored in a database that's owned by the client. From a GDPR standpoint, so data privacy and GDPR, obviously there's lots of kind of sort of red flags and process requirements around that. What we try to do as a business is make our product, so we have white papers and documentation around data privacy, and the product is GDPR ready, so you can turn functions and features off or on in the software and on the devices to make it more secure or more kind of privacy driven or less, depending on your company policies or your region of use. So Central Europe, for example, France and Germany, almost impossible to get biometric only into those kind of environments. So we provide the platform to enable people to enroll template to card or mobile. So the user, the actual user of the technology, holds the biometric data themselves.
On the actual card itself.
Actual card. So the readers effectively, so the client doesn't hold the database of information, the devices don't hold any information, the user holds all of their data in the card. So that's how we ultimately overcome privacy issues. On the flip side of that, if you're trying to, so you sell biometrics as a way to kind of cost saving and carbon footprint reduction because we can get rid of single-use plastic and things like that. You know, once you put templates on cards, it kind of negates the argument for doing it. But we provide a product that gives people the ability to put processes in place to ensure that there is no data held to fit their kind of environment and application. And that's true of fingerprint or face. It's a kind of irrelevant of which kind of modality of biometric you're using.
Okay. And that, we're wholly owned by Axis Communications, and at the minute the directive from Axis is they aren't interested in looking at facial recognition and storing that data. I think they're waiting to see how legislation shakes out across various parts of the world, key markets, because it is still very much up in the air. And so what our approach at the minute, and this sort of came out of talking with a colleague in Spain, where I believe they're pretty anti biometric databases there, is we have a Bluetooth credential, and you can door by door set that to work in different modes. We talked about convenience versus security, and one of the modes is you need to unlock the phone, go into our app and press a button. Well, most people have a biometric lock on their phone. We talked about that earlier. And so in those markets that are very averse to central companies holding biometric databases, that's another way of tackling it. You talk about it with using the phone as well.
Yeah.
That basically, the responsibility then lies with the user rather than their employer or their place they live in or whatever. So I think there's different ways to tackle it.
Yeah, I think one important kind of note to that is, and I think I might have touched on it earlier, is it may come across as kind of just a kind of a small thing, but we're very conscious about educating that what we're doing is face detection, face authentication, not face recognition. And it might be quite nuanced, but it's important.
Big difference between
so
the
when
two.
when you look at the social media and publications, lots of brands get named in this kind of facial recognition conversation.
Retail,
and because we do devices that detect your face, we kind of get lumped in with that.
Yeah,
and actually, and that's all around analytics and kind of gender, kind of age, like demographic information. We're not interested in that. Our kind of sole purpose is to make sure that the person looking at the reader or presenting their fingerprint is the person. It doesn't matter how old you are, what gender you are, or anything like that. We just want to make sure as accurately as possible that the people going through those doors are the people that have got access.
Right access.
Yeah.
So face authentication, not face recognition.
You mentioned talking about cards and the reduced use of plastic, etc. Traditionally, with both intercoms and access control, it started off with your cards and moved on to fobs and the different types of fobs there are. Are we seeing more push towards your mobile credentials as opposed to still your traditional fobs and cards? What are you seeing in the market?
Yeah, there's definitely a shift, and it kind of runs parallel to the sort of face authentication shift in the market. And you've only got to go on LinkedIn and look at all of the companies that are involved in that at the moment, whether it be kind of HID, Wavelength, Steed, different communities that are appearing. There's definitely a shift towards the adoption of mobile credential. I think the legacy of cards globally, forget about just the UK, but globally the legacy of cards, it's not going to be an overnight shift.
Yeah.
And also, I think, so encryption wise, it's more important than ever that people are considering, the use of whether it be HIDs, sort of secure COS or like DesFire EV3 and things like that to kind of lock down their cards or their mobile credentials. That's kind of critical. I think the difficulty with mobile credential technology right now is that there's a number of manufacturers that have got their own technology that works with their own readers, and there is a huge kind of pull, and there's a lot of people out there, all of the guys that I've just mentioned before and more, that are trying to come to some kind of standardization.
Bit like OnVIF in the CCTV world.
Yeah, kind of. So I think there's this Leaf community, and there's a couple of others as well. But I think manufacturer-wise, we've got it working. So if you're using Suprema end-to-end, or another,
it's seamless.
It's great. It works fantastically. The first question everybody asks is, will it work with Apple Wallet? Well, look, yes, there's products that do and there's products that don't, and there's benefits for and against depending on what your budgets are and convenience and different things like that. I think, there's still a way to go from an end user perspective to get like an ideal world where they can have choice. So we want everybody to buy our products, but ultimately
security is first, and then
kind of. Look, and
But I think this goes back to that whole convenience versus security spectrum, and if you have something that's more universal, that may be more convenient for the users, but that actually, there may be certain sites, doors, areas, whatever, where, the chances are by making it more universal, you've probably made it less secure. Yeah. And there's certain areas, you talked about data centers as an area you operate in, frankly, convenience for the user is not the highest priority. Security is the highest priority, because if that goes wrong, that user may not have a job. Yeah,
this is this is kind of where I don't know. I'm sure you've kind of spoken to, if you're over the past kind of if you look the past 18 months or so, the kind of appearance of numerous PIAMs, so the physical identity access management providers, that are able to take multiple kind of identity strands into them and then be able to use them across disparate systems. That's a huge kind of market now, because the reality is that there's so many legacy systems out there, and there's so many kind of acquisitions within, whether it be the data center market or retail, and so you've got all of these. You might have 3 different access platforms and 3 different credential types, whether it be mobile, fingerprint, plastic card, or whatever it might be. The relative cost of trying to standardise across all of those is astronomical, right? It's just not going to happen. So the kind of importance of these PIAMs is becoming sort of more and more real, particularly at the enterprise level, where they want to be able to use they've only just changed one site, or they bought a site and it's got brand new kit on it. Well, they're not going to rip it all out and put a load of new product in. So how do we mitigate that or minimise the impact to the business, but have a better administration process? So, from our perspective, it's important that we're talking to these guys and figuring out what integration looks like, so that they can consume not just our mobile credential alongside other people's, but what about our face and our fingerprint technology as well?
Because and you just touched on integration. That's a key thing now, I think, within all of the industry, is integrating different products to work seamlessly together. So let's say, for example, I wanted to use one of your devices with a 2N and vice versa. Is there that open integration with? Are you seeing that with the brands that, yes, look, we're happy to integrate with anything?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a really important part of our business. We do have our own end-to-end platform, and that's obviously a huge focus for us, both with our cloud product and our on-premise. But the reality of the global kind of access control landscape is that legacy product exists. Different markets have got different kind of players that perform better than others. But I think, particularly because of the type of product that we deliver, so biometrics, it's a bit different. I think there's lots of companies that are investing in mobile credential technology, and they might be bringing out their own camera, or they might be building a VMS, or whatever it might be. I think biometrics is still one of those where people would rather integrate with a perceived expert or a market leader, because of the nuances and the complexities around it. And so to that end, yes, that's kind of plays a pivotal role in what we do. So we do integrate with the majority of kind of the access control world. I think more and more with the advent of cloud and with the kind of our reach outside of pure security and access control, we're seeing the ability or the need to integrate with third-party software platforms. So not just access control, but again, I've talked about it previously, whether building management systems, smart buildings, workforce management, through to membership packages, and simplifying those kind of applications. But that's only built around openness of integration. I don't say open APIs, because I think that's just, everybody touts, we've got an open API, it's dead easy.
But I think that's something, that's something that attracted me to 2N. My background in recent years was in the home automation industry, which is all about taking different systems and then having some overlay system that knows how to bring them all into one interface. And, you know, within the security world, we see that a bit with some of the security control room software that can bring in alarms and CCTV and intercoms and door entry and all that sort of thing. But to do that, you need to have underpinnings that are based on standards and inherently being open to talking to other systems. So we see that, you know, like in the residential world this year, we launched an integration with Coney elevators. So that's an access control integration, because what we're doing is at the front door, you know, we're using access control to decide whether someone's a resident. And if they are, we're opening the door. But at the same time, we know who they are and what floor they live on. We can pass that information over to the elevator system, and it can bring down an elevator car with their floor pre-selected. The same if they let a visitor in, a Deliveroo guy or granny's pop round to visit or whatever. So it's even about integrations outside of the security world.
Definitely.
But the flip side of it, and I know we both sort of have this as a hot button, is the cybersecurity side, which is if you've got a platform that, you know, is network based and is designed inherently to talk to other systems other than itself, you've got to be very, very careful about who those other systems are, and is it something masquerading as an integration or a user or something. And so, you know, that's another part of the shift, sort of mega trend thing, you know, like COVID and all the rest of it. This stuff is happening whether we want it to or not. And if you want the benefits of having platforms that are inherently able to integrate and therefore give you more benefits than just the system on its own can deliver, you've got to understand there's risks with that, and you need to have approaches to that, which I think when it comes to things like channel and users is understanding you don't buy a product that's secure and you're done. You know, if you put that intercom on the outside of your building or that access control system on your doors a year ago, well, whatever the problems were then, there's new ones now, and maybe you should be doing firmware updates and things like that.
That's where, going back to cloud, actually, that
you can do automatic updates.
Well, you don't have this like patch
rely on someone to go
Thursdays, we kind of call it. You know, it's inherent in the product itself. So again, I think this is Lewis at Vicada.
Once you do updates,
the product's only the worst it's ever going to be is the day you put it in. Cloud gives you that capability of, you know, immediate improvements, whereas the on-prem is largely down to your consistent delivery of you know, patches or product development, and your integrator having the consistency to do those kinds of things.
And I think that's the key is whether it's the integrator or the building manager or whatever, it's that culture change of, oh, it's not like you buy something and you bolt it in place and now we're done. It's, you know, like having a nice car. You once a year or something, you need to schedule updating it and you know, servicing it basically. And I think that's one of the bigger shifts that maybe makes some people uncomfortable with some of the newer solutions in the market. Is like, oh, that's not how we used to operate. We put something in and then we walk away and we're done now.
We've kind of our investment into certification around cybersecurity has ramped up another level probably in the last 18 months to 2 years. And the difficulty with that as well is, obviously, as a global brand, is, you know, what's certified in the UK is different to what we have in another country, and so we end up, you know, it's
multiple certifications,
and it's an expensive investment, but it's a necessity, right? We can't build and confidently secure our products without those certifications. So if you're not willing to invest in CISOs and cybersecurity certification, then you're kind of going backwards, or you know, you're going to come unstuck. So that's kind of key to evolving as a business.
It's a good point you touched on, because that's on the cybersecurity side of things. What I want to touch on is, I've seen in lots of forums and I've visited a high street store where I can take along a fob or a card and have it cloned. Now, that sort of like brings me to the point of how secure is the system? Because that's just like me taking Jed's keys, going and having it copied. I can take your fob without you knowing, have it cloned, and then an event could take place. Why aren't the manufacturers sort of like making them more secure? I know you said HID have this WaveStore or the more secure technology.
Yeah, well, it's not the manufacturers that aren't making it more secure. I think the issue is sites updating their technology. Mm-hmm. And I'm not suggesting that that's even to biometrics or mobile credential, right? Because those two things
evolving with the times, is it, as we say?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the UK market's absolutely flooded still, and I think maybe the US, but focusing on the UK, you know, there's thousands of doors out there that are still operating on old technology.
Yeah.
So procs.
Or even let's go back to PIN codes where you can even see the numbers are worn out. Yeah. So you could be able to figure out what 0000 something.
Yeah, and that's down to, I guess that's a combination of the end user and whether they care, whether they've got budget, but also to their integrator that's maintaining the site, of whether they
should be recommending
upgrades and things like that.
I think it's also, I mean, one of the things I see posted on LinkedIn probably every 2 months on average is the picture of a secure door wedged open with a fire extinguisher. And the message behind that is that whatever sort of access control technology you put in, it has to be appropriate, because otherwise people are pretty inventive in terms of finding ways around it. So you either, you know, need to find something, if it's a high security area, train users to understand, okay, we have a method, it's probably going to be inconvenient to you, but, you know, ultimately maybe your job depends on it, so deal with it. Or pick a method that's convenient but difficult enough to, you know, it's a low threat area, but it's enough of a discouragement to the wrong people to get through there. And so, you know, that's why there are old PIN things around, because probably those are doors that, you know, it's been adequate as a technology. And we touched upon this earlier. Things like QR codes and PINs as short-term credentials are great because they're easy to deliver. You don't need any special app. It is just a number or a picture. So you can WhatsApp it, you can text it, whatever. But the flip side is it's easy to then share to the wrong people. So if it's valid for weeks and weeks on end, that's a lot of time for it to get to the wrong hands. So it's all about, you know, making it so that the security at a given point is good enough that it stops the bad stuff happening, but not so difficult that the good people start breaking it and working their way around it.
I mean, I think that there's like, so those kind of stores that you can do those kind of things in, you know, that's born out of convenience because it's a hassle to go and buy a card from a security integrator that it's going to cost you. It's people trying to save money, right?
Yes, yes.
I mean, I guess. And so it's for small sites. I think the you know, as a kind of industry, you've got to try and get out and get people off the type of technology that's easy to clone. You know, you can buy cloning kits from Amazon now and go and sit in a reception area of a company and clone 20 cards and no one knows anything about it. So it's not just shops that you can do these things in. We talked earlier about, you know, Flipper Zero. You see that
very common at the moment.
And you know, we kind of test with those types of things to try and understand them better. But they're, as quickly as you can manufacture new, more secure technology,
someone's coming out with something to break it.
Like hacking community is it's
a big thing.
It's a huge thing, and so. And it's an important thing to you know, you can't dismiss it anymore as you know, no one brush it under the carpet. You've got to be willing to accept the kind of the ethical stuff that you get so that you can improve your product. I think that's really important. But I just think as an industry, it's understanding what the purpose of the access control is for, to determine whether there's value in upgrading to more secure credentials, whether they be cards, mobile credentials, or otherwise. Hopefully biometrics.
And then the staff training that goes with it, so that they understand why this is being implemented. I was going to
kind of touch on that as well, because I think the other thing that's really interesting is the administration of intelligent access systems. It's a bit like your CCTV footage and how you manage that, I guess. It's only really as valuable as your kind of process for administering the system. I mean, the number of sites I've been to, and there's people that are still on the system that haven't worked there for 5 years, right?
And they've not deleted the details off.
Yeah. Now, the likelihood of those people coming back is pretty slim, but nevertheless, you could have the most secure site in the world, but if you don't administer it properly, then it kind of doesn't matter. What I think is interesting is like the whole, advent and the hottest topic of them all, like AI and things like that, is, and a lot of that is based around sort of camera intelligence and cause and effect, and the intelligence to be able to spot threat levels and isolate certain demographics and incidents. But equally, I think the intelligence behind access platforms to be able to dynamically manage the access system, so onboarding and offboarding of users, so automating enrolment, single sign-on and things like that is around and all very well, but the intelligence of the software to know that somebody's not used the system for X amount of time. So do we
delete them off,
remove them, do we
them,
bar them,
etc.
archive them? But to do it intelligently, so that it doesn't rely on manual processes. The minute that we start doing that, and I know that there's systems that are doing that, but the minute that we're able to implement those systems consistently, then the access control solution becomes far more valuable than it currently is under a kind of a manual process resource, effectively.
Well, I it's interesting. I've been involved in a bunch of discussions about AI in all sorts of sectors over the past few months, and the general consensus has always been, where it actually makes sense is any task where it basically, to do it manually is very time consuming, and you probably always want to keep a human in the loop, but basically AI can do a lot of repetitive tasks very frequently and in the background. So that makes sense that basically doing statistical analysis of who's doing what when, and here's someone that's not done anything for 3 months. Let's highlight that to the HR manager and go, do they still work here? Should they still be in the system?
Because access control collects so much data. But the reality of what's done with that is,
not much, is it?
And actually,
probably not much. But if you tie it into...
Well, one of the interesting things that I've actually had crop up a few times now in the residential side in the last 3 or 4 months from various different people is monitoring antisocial behaviour in blocks of flats. And it's sort of like, is there a flat that's letting people through the door, let's say after 10:30 at night on a regular basis every night? If they're letting people in every 20 minutes through the night, most nights of the week, they're not having a party.
But that goes back full circle to the integration piece, right? So you want to, whoever's camera it is, integrated into your door entry or your access control to be able to take that data to talk to that data to kind of give you some.
Yeah, but it's also about
evidential.
recognising, hey, there are patterns in this
Yeah,
data.
absolutely.
We've got a record of who let who in and at what time, and that in
let's
itself
have a look
is
at who's
useful.
coming
But
and-
it's actually, are there patterns to this?
Yeah, of
Because
course,
if a flat is letting people in every night, every few minutes, let's just say they're running a business out of that flat of some sort, and neither of the immediate options are legal. So of itself, it's just a record of something happened, and there's no, residents are allowed to have guests and let them in. But if
They
you're
all
doing
kind
it
of
in a certain
bleed
way,
into
that's
each
an
other,
indication
right?
of something else.
Because that we could go back and talk about integration, but then on the flip side, we could go back and talk about GDPR and what's the privacy outcome around you having
that information
kind of
that you're watching
information and
these
stuff.
people.
So it kind of all intertwines, I guess. But I think access control is an interesting one from AI. CCTV, I think, it's quite evident that
It's the buzzword in CCTV at the moment.
and
AI.
and it's incredible the stuff that you can do and the way the software kind of works. I think access control. It's difficult to. It's more about the data from what you do with the data rather, because whether you get through a door with a fingerprint, a face, a card, a pin, you're getting through a door, right? Without dumbing it down too much, because I've been doing it a long time and I love it. But it's what you do with that information. I think that
one
that
thing
is
I
so
just want to
important.
ask that's just come into my head is when you were talking about this AI stuff. You've seen a lot more now of people making these silicon masks, and they're actually getting quite good.
Yeah.
How? I'm guessing you guys have tested stuff like this, but how are you getting to a point where you look at these AI videos that are coming out now, where you're like, wow,
Yeah.
are we gonna get to a point where I'll be able to replicate your face as a mask and be able to get through a facial recognition door?
Yeah, that's kind of a constant battle
Right.
for us. So and it's something that, that's kind of core to the development and the.
Is that where you have to work out the different algorithms and
So we
ever evolving?
Yes, it is ever evolving, right? Because again, going back to the whole kind of security element, no matter what you bring out, it's constantly
Something's coming out after.
somebody's going to push
yeah.
it to its boundaries. So we have live and fake finger detection. We have AI built into our face devices and our newest fingerprint devices for anti-spoofing and intelligence around live and fake face. But again, as people become more as people
develop more things,
and test more and go into more detail, we have to. It's kind of our job to stay
firefighting kind of thing, aren't you? all
yeah,
the
kind
time?
of. But I think that's just technology in
Trying
general,
to be
right?
one step ahead of
That's
It's
ultimately
nature of
that's
security,
the nature of
isn't it?
security, is to stay ahead of the vulnerabilities, and that's kind of goes back to cybersecurity, to kind of AI and stuff like that. So it is ever evolving, and I think the actual important piece for us is to consistently push the development and the algorithms and the intelligence of our devices to become better. And that goes back to even things like devices working externally and in sunlight and harsh conditions and things like that. I know it's not, we're not talking AI there, but
it's something that you have to always have.
You do, yeah. And you build a device and it's incredible in
One
the
scenario,
environment, and then you put it into another site and it's slightly different. And so we have to. That's the whole nature of evolving and sort of product development, I think.
But I was just sort of thinking, with my intercom hat on rather than access control, that's one of the things, the whole facial people spoofing on that front. A video intercom fundamentally is doing that in a human-centric way, because someone could be wearing a mask or whatever, but you've also, in the call coming through to someone, it's presumably someone who's then got a set of rules in their head of like, am I expecting this person? Does it make sense that what I'm seeing does that face make sense at this point of time in the day or whatever? You know, do they look like a delivery driver, or do they look like someone who's saying they're a security guard, or what? So it's interesting because, yeah, it's basically technology trying to do what a human's doing and has been doing for a while in that situation. But I guess it's, again, going back to this idea of then doing it in an unmanned way, that it can be an automatic process.
So we have so the Q-Face product that we do. So we've got an AI division specifically within our business, and you know, it's not just in kind of standard off-the-shelf access control products, but our technology is being put into cash machines, ATMs, to be able to, so the intelligence in those cameras can detect if somebody's being under duress. So they've got someone holding a knife to them or something like that. So there is intelligence in the product natively to be able to do those kinds of things. And I think that's kind of where the access control door entry technology is going to start evolving, is doing more than just letting someone through a door or denying some access. It's going to detect if, like you said, that this doesn't seem right, so I'm going to do something with it.
Yeah, it's a sort of instinctive aspect that humans do automatically.
Yeah, rather than it's interesting you say flat number 5 going, that doesn't look right.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the under duress thing, one of the other features we have is the ability to bring in a secondary camera feed into an intercom call. So that can be the thing of, like, you know, normally an intercom is looking at someone's face flat on, but if you've got another camera looking at that entry point, maybe you can say, oh, hang on, there's someone behind them, awfully close, that doesn't look right. I mean, we see it also at vehicle entry points where, frankly, you know, seeing the face of a driver is nice, but if it's a different delivery driver each day, it doesn't really tell you much. But if you can see the vehicle and you go, oh, it's DPD or Royal Mail or whatever, that tells you more. But again, that's a human-centric process. You're talking about doing it on a more automated way.
That was basically my question to sort of like wrap up, is if we were to sit here in 5 years' time, what would you see the future of access control, and what would have evolved by then?
Hopefully, face authentication everywhere.
That'd be good for your business.
With a big Suprema logo on it.
No, I think we kind of only see the face and mobile credential technology growing stronger, kind of year on year. Whether anything comes along that accelerates that more than it has already, I think going back to what I was saying before about this kind of standardization of mobile credential acceptance, or agreements or communities, or I think I do genuinely, particularly in the enterprise kind of world, I think PIAMs will accelerate adoption of mobile credential. And I think, the more people become educated and the kind of demographics of people within our industry change, we get younger people into the industry over the next kind of 4 or 5 years, I think the acceptance of biometrics and face authentication will become easier and kind of more widely adopted, and an improved kind of understanding of kind of GDPR and data privacy. And actually, if you look at a lot of the stuff coming out of government of late, there's a lot of attention and actual focus on kind of facial authentication and facial recognition technology and
digital ID and all this, everything.
And so
things like that.
And that's going to go through all of the same kind of challenges that we have already, and again, we talk about this all of the time. It's very rare that you get 100% acceptance of biometrics in any given estate. And you're even seeing that with mobile credential, right? People don't want to adopt it because they feel like they shouldn't have to because it's their own device. But as the young Gen Z, Gen Z, cut that Gen
move
Z,
into it,
Gen Z, move into the workplace, they want
changing.
it. They want it for their house. They want it for their building.
Actually, we've got an example of that. There's a case study, a site up near Potter's Bar on the outskirts of London, and it's a sort of offices for rent with a leisure centre at the bottom and all sorts. And when they put the system in there, primarily they assumed everyone would be using RFID. But they added in the Bluetooth capabilities, the phone credentials.
And is that embedded into a like a residential? But we've worked with a company that have got like an app, a community app.
In that case, it's not. It's
key.
Yeah, it's our own app. But
so that's what I would see.
But what happened there was when they first deployed it, they assumed people would want the RFID option because they didn't think people would want to put an app on their phone to be able to get through doors at the leisure centre or to their offices or whatever. And since that site's been live for a few years, and we held an event there earlier this year, and we were talking to the integrator, and he said, we've added X number of doors to the system, and it shifted from being, I think it was like 75% RFID to like 80% phone credentials now. Because what happened there, one of the modes of use, and I actually saw it sat in the reception there, is with our Bluetooth, you can leave your phone in your pocket and you can just go up to the reader, touch it, it will reach out to the phone and let you through the door. You don't have to have it work that way, but in this environment, that was the right mix of convenience and security for them, because lots of people going to the gym with their phone in the backpack or whatever, and they don't want to rummage around for it. And I'm guessing what happened is, customers were being handed RFID cards for their access to the gym and stuff, and then they were seeing other people just walking up to the door and touching it, and when they asked, they were told, you have to download an app for that. Oh, I'm fine with that. If the benefits outweigh the hassle factor, and I think talking to the youth thing side of things, I'm certainly an old fuddy-duddy, and if, a particular restaurant or supermarket says, you can have something, but you've got to get our app, I'm like, I don't need another app. But I get the feeling younger people are like, if there's something in it for me, I'll have 5 more apps. It's
have you seen a 20-year-old's phone, the amount of apps they have?
So
it's like
so I think this is one of the things that is shifting. I think to go back to your question about what's likely to change over time, I think access control in general will become more invisible. And I think that'll be a mixture of technological changes. I think things like phone access and stuff will probably gather more momentum. But I think also there'll be a sort of more of an expectation of it and less of a pushback around it. I think people will start to realise, well, hang on, there's benefits. I can get into my block of flats easily if I do this, or getting around at work or whatever. I have to agree to it at work, but I want that job, sort of thing, or whatever. Yeah. I think as the bigger trends, digital ID happens or doesn't happen, I think we'll find where the comfort level is for people in general in terms of digital authentication, and I think the industry, the technology will meet that level and go, okay, this is what people are comfortable with. We'll deploy this on a door-by-door basis.
And I think a natural part of that progression will be cloud, just by its very nature and the type of applications that people are willing to kind of place on their devices, and coupled with user experience will drive. So in the mass market, I think user experience will drive a lot of the technology that's being deployed, whether it be through mobile applications, cloud access, and a mix of biometrics as well. And I think from an enterprise end, kind of unification of systems. So centralisation of access control, visitor management, video management, wireless lock-in, parking, all of those solutions will there's a driving demand for sort of central management systems, whatever that looks like, whether it's embedded into your access platform or your VMS or a PSIM or whatever it might be. I think there's a real drive for kind of unification of systems.
We'll have to come back in 5 years' time and have this podcast again and play back what you said to
see whether we actually know what we're talking about. Yeah.
Gentlemen, I'd like to thank you very much for your time to come out onto this podcast, and hopefully we should have you again on in the future.
Appreciate it. Thanks very much. Cheers, guys.
That wraps up our discussion on access control. We covered everything from how the market's evolved to whether cards and fobs are still secure and how cloud and biometrics are reshaping the future of access. A huge thank you to Jamie from Suprema and Jez from 2N for joining me and sharing their insights today. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe to Room Secured on YouTube and follow us across social media for more industry discussions. And as always, this is Room Secured, real talk from inside the industry.